Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, dear friends, fellow critical thinkers. Today we will assess a video made by Christian apologist Trent Horn. Trent is someone who thinks that he makes very good points, and that is why he brings to bear his best arguments and evidence to refute the atheist position. So, let's see what Trent has got to tell us today.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Council of Trent podcast. I'm your host, Catholic Answers apologist and speaker Trent Horn. And today I'm going to be rebutting a video on YouTube from an atheist YouTuber. I don't know his name, so I'm just going to call him the narrator in this episode, that seeks to show that God does not exist. Now, I'm just going to be completely upfront with you. This is more on the low-hanging fruit. In fact, this fruit is hanging so low you could scoop it off of the ground.
But Trent, guess what we atheists consider you to be? Exactly, the low-hanging fruit of reasoning and logic. But of course, in a company of Christian apologists, that doesn't mean so much. Basically, all Christian apologists are low-hanging fruit, because the vast majority of their arguments is totally ridiculous.
But the thing is, because it's so low-hanging and accessible to people, it's really popular. The video has hundreds of thousands of views, so I think it merits giving a reply to it, because you hear these arguments are so common. It's good to have a general retort to them.
Trent, we atheists have got a much worse problem. All over the world, 3 billion people believe in your God, without there being any sufficient evidence that he even exists. And that gullibility is caused by people like yourself, who spread silly arguments that don't make any sense. Yet most people prefer answers over truth. If scientific truth is too complicated for them, they much rather hear your simple yet unsubstantiated solutions. What happened before the Big Bang? The actual truth is, we don't know. And in order to explain some options regarding this question, we would have to resort to complex scientific theories. People don't like that. So then Christian apologists step in and say, "Oh, God did it." Well, that's easy to digest. There is no evidence that any of it is true, but at least many people like that message. In fact, Trent, so many people like that message that people like yourself can make good money selling that silliness to the people. But let's continue to your arguments.
Let's jump right into it.
In this video, we will discuss whether or not the existence of a transcendent God is probable. And the reason why I use the word probable is because you can't prove a negative. This means that you can't disprove statements or claims that we in practice are unable to observe. For instance, you can't prove to me that Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or leprechauns doesn't exist.
Actually, we can prove negative, unobservable claims. There are no married bachelors, for example.
Oh, come on, Trent. You accuse this atheist of being low-hanging fruit, and then your rebuttal is the married bachelor. Really? Why do Christian apologists keep mentioning the married bachelor when they know this is a rubbish rebuttal that atheists have demonstrated to be nonsense over and over again? The argument you can't prove a negative, of course, comes with a disclaimer that says that the argument does not apply to things you define as impossible to exist. Of course, we can come up with many nonsense concepts that cannot possibly exist because we choose to define them in a way that contradicts itself. So there is the married bachelor, the squared circle, the static movement, etc. And by comparing your God to a married bachelor, you unintentionally suggest that your God doesn't exist either, just like a married bachelor. So that argument doesn't really help you. If you want to make an honest comparison, then stick to things that we haven't defined up front as non-existing. That is why this atheist compares your God to Santa Claus, to the Tooth Fairy and leprechauns. All of them are defined in a way that does not necessarily contradict itself, yet all of them seem to be invisible. and indetectable, but not detecting them does not prove that they don't exist. Maybe we didn't use the proper equipment. Maybe we didn't observe at the proper time or place. We can arrange for 1 billion observations and still don't detect any of them. And it still doesn't prove they don't exist. Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, leprechauns, and your God are all the same from that perspective. That was the point.
We can also say things like Santa Claus does not exist, because if he did, the world would be different.
Well, Trent, the same way I can argue that your God doesn't exist, because if he did, the world would be different as well. Your God supposedly is all-powerful, all-knowing, and he loves us. Then why did your God slowly and deliberately drown almost the entire world population, including babies and children? That's not loving. If your God is all-powerful, then why doesn't he finish Satan? If your God is all-knowing, then why didn't he see the Holocaust coming? If your all-powerful, all-knowing and loving God would exist, the world would be a very different place from what we can see now. Instead, we see a world that looks exactly like a world in which no God exists at all.
For example, parents like me wouldn't have to buy presents because if Santa Claus existed, the presents would appear magically under the tree. Since they don't, we know Santa Claus isn't real.
Oh boy. Trent, I will now serve you the exact same nonsense that Christian apologists spout when they are confronted with the exact same issues regarding their God. And perhaps that'll make you realize how totally silly your arguments are. Trent, do you know why you've got to buy your own presents? That is, Trent, because Santa Claus is testing you. What you should do is submit to him. You should repent promoting your false god and instead start worshipping Santa Claus, because only then you will be saved and get unlimited presents for eternity. But you, Trent, you reject Santa Claus, and that is why you now have to buy your own presents. But it's getting worse, because Santa has made this special place at the South Pole where you will be buried for eternity in ice. You will shiver from the cold forever and ever and ever if you keep rejecting Santa Claus. So ask yourself, why so serious about your own fake God? But that, of course, is your own choice, because Santa Claus loves you and gave you free will to make your own decision.
And if you wanted to disprove God, you'd have to make a similar kind of argument.
I think I just did, and it was very easy.
Also can't disprove that there is a 5-headed dragon orbiting some random planet in the galaxy of Andromeda, or perhaps a flying spaghetti monster or a teapot hovering around in space. Neither is it possible to prove the non-existence of God, whether it is Yahweh, Thor, Zeus, Poseidon, Kali, Hades, Sao Shen, Amun-Ra, Vishnu, Aphrodite, Apollo, Ganesha, or any of the countless examples of man-made deities.
So if you can't prove their non-existence, what are we doing here?
Well, exactly, Trent. If you don't know what we're doing here, because disproving the non-existence of your God is nonsense, then Christian apologists should stop using it as an argument. So let us agree that from now on, you can't prove that God doesn't exist is not an argument. It proves nothing. It teaches us nothing. It doesn't lead to anything. So go and tell your community of Christian apologists to no longer come up with that nonsense. We atheists have been telling you that for centuries now.
I would say in many of these cases, what we do know about spaghetti or animals shows certain beings cannot exist or do not exist, like the flying spaghetti monster.
Ah, now you start to understand. So in the same way, what we do know about the universe and about organisms and beings is that an immaterial, timeless, spaceless being cannot exist. And as soon as you find whatever reason to propose that immaterial, timeless and spaceless beings can exist, then there you go. I will serve you an immaterial, timeless and spaceless spaghetti monster. And you no longer got any good reason not to believe that this spaghetti monster can exist. If your God can be immaterial, timeless and spaceless, then so can my spaghetti monster.
but there's nothing we know about God from which we could make a similar claim.
Exactly, Trent. There is nothing to be known about your God, because he hasn't been proven to exist.
How can we examine the existence of God? Well, we can use two simple methods. First, we can look at the evidence at hand. Now, usually it's whomever that makes a claim that has the burden of proof. But since theists haven't provided any such evidence for the existence of God, we won't be able to take use of this first method. Now, if you're sitting at home yelling at your computer and at the sound of my voice because you most definitely have good evidence for the existence of God, you shouldn't write it in the comment section of this video. No, you should finish up that scientific article of yours, publish it, and take a flight straight to Norway to receive your Nobel Peace Prize for finally revealing to humanity how the world actually works.
First, the question of whether God exists is like the question of whether morality or moral facts, minds, or free will exists. It's a philosophical question. It's not a scientific one.
Trent, that's another apologetic smokescreen. The distinction between what you call philosophical and scientific questions is irrelevant for the issue if a God exists. If you say your God exists, you're making a truth claim. It doesn't matter if you call it philosophical or scientific, as long as you claim that your God has influence on our real physical world. Then you make a truth claim that should be testable. If you say your God exists, we should be able to measure, observe and detect your God. If you can't do any of that, then there is no reason for you to know if he exists, which makes your God claim useless. And you're not trying to hide that by calling your God claim philosophical. It isn't. Saying that a God exists without any sufficient evidence to back it up is not philosophy, it's just nonsense.
Second, the narrator is confusing proof and evidence. You can have evidence to support a view without being able to prove the view is true. Evidence is just anything that would make something more likely to be true, even if it's not proof. Your fingerprints in a friend's house is evidence that you stole something if your friend reported a theft.
Trent, we must be very thankful that you're not a police officer or a judge. A fingerprint of a friend in my house is evidence that he stole something? Are you out of your mind? The guy is my friend, so I let him inside my house because he's a friend. He's at my place all the time. His fingerprint should be in my house. So that fingerprint of my friend doesn't make it more likely that he stole my stuff at all. So Trent, do you think that my own fingerprint in my house also is evidence that I stole my own stuff? So anyway, let all of this be a warning to people who think they are befriended with Trent Horn and who sometimes visit his house. You better start wearing gloves from now on. Trent, this is really one of the core problems with many Christian apologists like yourself. You simply don't seem to have any idea what evidence is, while at the same time lecturing other people about evidence. Many of you seem to think that if you call something evidence, it now is evidence. A very prominent example of that is, oh, look at the trees. God created trees, so the existence of trees proves that God exists. That is not evidence. That is toddler reasoning. It's like claiming that ice giants have walked the earth, but we don't observe them, which is evidence that Odin killed all of them.
But in terms of the list of gods, depending on whether you are an atheist, monotheist or polytheist, you only subscribe to that god or those gods that your religion claims to be true.
This is the I believe in one less God than you objection, and it's silly. It's like Bob's defense lawyer at a trial saying, I know Bob is a suspect for the murder, but you all think Mary is innocent, and you all think Frank is innocent of the murder. I just believe in one more innocent person than you do. Bob is also innocent, like Frank and Mary. That's silly. Just because there's a lot of people who don't fit the profile of the murderer, it doesn't mean there isn't one person who does fit that profile based on the evidence. Likewise, just because there are many false gods that don't fit the profile of the ultimate creator of reality, it doesn't follow that there isn't a true God who does.
Trent, this is one of those key moments where you clearly show not to understand the argument that you're trying to refute, or you just pretend that you don't understand, which would be dishonest. The one less God argument clearly is a very powerful argument, because none of these 10,000 gods in which people from all over the world believe has been proven to exist. None of them has been proven to exist. The whole concept of a timeless, spaceless, immaterial God has not been proven to exist. That is why it's a very strong argument to say, if you reject all the other gods that people believe in, then what good reason do you have to hold on to that one specific God that basically represents the same concept as all the other supposed timeless, spaceless, and immaterial beings? To compare this to people in a murder court case is total nonsense, because we know that people demonstrably exist. Murder exists, court cases exist. We can all prove that. So your comparison to the real and existing world falls totally flat. If you want some honest comparison, come up with a case that involves supposed entities that are not proven to exist. For example, characters from The Lord of the Rings. Trent, in that case, you only believe in Gandalf, but not in Frodo or Sauron. The guy next door only believes in Frodo, but not in Gandalf or Sauron. And Trent, then I say, you know what? These characters are all similar. They all supposedly live in this Middle-earth place that no one has ever proven to exist. Yet you are critical towards the existence of all the other inhabitants of Middle-earth, except for your one favorite character. So I, as an Middle-earthist, say, you know what? I just believe in one character less than you do. I don't believe that either Gandalf, Frodo, or Sauron exists, because there is no sufficient evidence to support the existence of any one of them. That would be the proper comparison.
The reason I don't believe in gods like Zeus or Thor is because they are not God by definition.
Yeah, sure, you don't believe in Zeus and Odin because they're not your favorite characters. You define your god the way you want to define him, and you reject any god that doesn't fit the description that you've chosen yourself. And that is what anyone does who believes in whatever god. So this argument is getting you nowhere.
The arguments for the existence of God lead to an infinite, purely actual source of being that is unchanging, timeless, and infinite in his attributes.
What arguments? You've given none. We're still waiting for your arguments for the existence of your God. You're trying to refute an atheist who clearly demonstrates the weakness of your arguments, and your supposed refutation of that is even weaker. What is even the point of listening to you?
We can then examine history to see if the God of classical theism revealed himself, which he did in the person of Jesus Christ.
No, you clearly have no clue how to build a case around your God claim by using proper evidence. All you do, just like any other Christian apologist, is you make an unsubstantiated claim. A God exists. And when asked for evidence to prove that claim, you just stack a new unsubstantiated claim on that. My God revealed himself through Jesus Christ. That is not evidence. That's just another unsubstantiated claim. Now you got two things to prove. Well, Jesus is real because he rose from the dead. That's yet another unsubstantiated claim. Now you got three things to prove. That is the game that you Christian apologists play. You make your unsubstantiated God claim and answer every question with a new unsubstantiated claim. Real evidence to support your claims is never presented. And this is one of the core issues with Christian apologists, which in most cases makes it impossible to have a serious conversation. Many of you simply do not understand the difference between an unsubstantiated claim and evidence. You seem to think that they're the same thing, but at the same time you do not accept it if we use that same principle that you apply to prove that Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy exist. Then you call it ridicule. You are mocking Christianity. Yes, because you present ridiculous ideas like God sacrificed his own son for you. No, he didn't. God didn't sacrifice anything. He knew in advance that he himself would bring Jesus back to life in a couple of days, and that all would be well. Your God never experienced any moment of stress or worry about this, so he sacrificed nothing. That is just another ridiculous idea of Christianity. And even if Jesus was crucified, died at the cross and did not resurrect, then Jesus would have spent eternity with the love of God in heaven. How is that, according to any Christian, a sacrifice? Isn't going to heaven all you guys want? Wasn't that the whole purpose of Christianity? So, the Christian God making the ultimate sacrifice, that is just another ridiculous idea of Christianity. And ridiculous ideas should be exposed with ridicule. And really, you can't take a bit of mockery while you yourself believe that your God will burn me forever in hell, and you already start whining when people expose your nonsense?
So his argument is that some religious explanations were wrong, therefore all religious explanations are wrong. Well, some scientific explanations for natural phenomena were wrong, but that doesn't mean all scientific explanations are wrong.
Oh, Trent, another fail, comparing your religion to science. No, it's totally different. The issue is not that all religious claims are wrong. The point is that none of them can prove to be true, because in the end you will always refer to immaterial, invisible, timeless and spaceless stuff that nobody can detect, measure or observe, so your religious claims are simply meaningless.
Sure, rain is not directly caused by some deity, but that doesn't mean that God did not create the universe.
Yeah, and that also doesn't mean that vampires and leprechauns don't exist. That is a useless observation. What we need is evidence that does prove the existence of your God. Lack of evidence that he doesn't exist is meaningless.
Right, we shouldn't use God of the gaps arguments to prove God exists. But I'd ask the narrator what proof he would accept. Under his view, there's no evidence that would be good enough.
Trent, how is it possible that you need to ask an atheist what evidence he needs to accept that a God exists? Just give me the evidence that convinced you. And if that is good evidence, I will accept it. If it's bad evidence, I will reject it, just like you should. And the fact that atheists have rejected all your evidence so far does not mean that atheists wouldn't accept any evidence. It most likely shows that up to now, your evidence was very weak.
In fact, there are many powerful evidences for God, but I doubt the narrator has bothered to look for any of them.
Trent, chances are that the atheist you're trying to refute knows all of them, all of these supposed arguments for your God. He probably read them and then yet again, each time wondering why anyone would think it proves anything.
There are, for example, arguments from motion that show, in principle, a universe composed of change can only be explained by an unchanging source of actuality.
That doesn't even mean anything. It's just a fancy way to rehash the age-old everything must have a cause argument. It's been debunked, refuted, and shown to be nonsense over and over again. It proves nothing, it demonstrates nothing, it doesn't even make anything more or less likely. Modern physics indicate that some things do not necessarily need to have a cause. For example, when particles pop into existence from nothing, no God needed for that. There's also the option of a self-repeating universe that perpetuates cycles of expansion and contraction. No God needed for that. And if the universe had a cause that brought it into motion, that could also have been a physical factor. For example, the singularity reaching a certain disbalance in energy distribution, leading to instability, eventually leading to the Big Bang. So many possibilities, no gods required.
There are arguments from causation that show causal chains into the past can't be infinite, and so there must be an uncaused cause.
That is the same argument as the previous argument. You think there must be some kind of first cause, which is nonsense. It doesn't need to be that way. And even if there is a first cause, then it could be a natural cause. And if it was something that we wouldn't consider to be a natural cause, then why would it be your specific God?
There are arguments from the fine-tuning of the constants of nature.
Oh, come on, Trent. The fine-tuning argument. Many atheists, including myself, we have debunked the crap out of that nonsense. The entire argument is a stupid trick. By calling it the fine-tuning argument, you already imply the thing that you're supposed to prove in the first place. The universe we observe is almost entirely unsuitable for life. The vast majority of it is empty space. No life possible there. Then there's trillions of stars. No life possible there. For life, we need to go to planets and moons. And although there are 8 planets and 293 moons in our solar system, we only know one where there is life, and that is Earth. And even on Earth, life is only possible within a minuscule layer of air. If the universe were designed for anything, it was intended to host empty space and not life. 99.9999% of the universe is extremely hostile towards life. If I were a god, and it was my objective to make a universe that is suitable for life, I would fill the empty space with air, for example. I would not invent deadly diseases. I would not plague the one place where life does occur with hurricanes and earthquakes. That would be a much more effective design strategy. But in reality, we see a universe that constantly tries to exterminate life as we know it. We see exactly the kind of universe that we would expect if there is no design at play. Then there are the physical constants, like the gravitational constants, of which you will say, if we only change them just a little bit, then life is no longer possible in the entire universe. That also indicates that no design is at play here. If a god would design a universe and sustaining life was his main goal, then of course he would have given a much bigger bandwidth to all these physical constants in which life could occur, because the way it is now, physical constants only need one little push and then life is gone. So that would be a very stupid design strategy. And then of course there's the thing that we don't even know if it's possible in the first place that physical constants could have other values. Maybe that isn't even possible. Maybe there is a fixed set of physical constants locked into a universe given a certain amount of energy and mass. So this argument, it puts the horse behind the carriage. Instead of first demonstrating a creator, it looks at the universe and hopes for signs of design. There aren't any.
Imagine 100 people are at a party, and 99 of them report hearing a loud noise at midnight. They disagree about whether it was a voice, or if it said a sentence, or if it was just a generic kind of sound, or what kind of sound it was. But should you conclude there was a sound, and they just can't agree because they were at different vantage points when they were hearing it? Should you believe that? Or should you just believe they were all deluded, and only one person is correct who didn't hear a sound at all? The same is true of experiencing God. It makes more sense to say 99% of human beings have experienced some supernatural reality, even if they can't agree on what it is, than to say that 99% of every human being who ever lived was simply deluded.
And this again is one of those points where Trent Horn obviously doesn't understand the basic principles of logic and reasoning, or perhaps he pretends not to understand. I'm not sure of that. But to compare a crowd who claims to have heard a sound to a crowd who claims to have witnessed a god is so utterly silly that it's embarrassing that Trent Horn even tries this. Now, when a crowd of people claims to have heard a sound, we do not have to think that all of them were deluded. And you know why? Because sounds demonstrably exist. We've got mountains of evidence that prove the existence of sounds. We can objectively measure, analyze, and produce sounds. So when a crowd claims to have heard a sound, there is no reason to think that they were deluded. However, when a crowd claims to have witnessed a god, a problem arises. Because contrary to sounds, gods do not demonstrably exist. We have no sufficient evidence for the existence of gods. We cannot objectively measure, analyze, or produce gods. None of our scientific knowledge indicates the existence of gods. So, when an entire crowd claims to have witnessed a god, the possibility of all of them being confused, wrong, deluded, under influence, or whatever, suddenly becomes a very real perspective.
I would ask the narrator, are there objective, factual questions science cannot answer in principle? Of course there are. For example, science just involves applying physical laws to matter and energy. That's what every scientific explanation ends up being. But if the universe began to exist from nothing, or if the chain of causes going back in time is finite, then the first cause cannot be a scientific explanation. Because in a state of nothingness, there is no matter, there is no energy, and there are no laws for any scientific explanation to use. Instead, there could only be a metaphysical explanation, grounded in God, who just is infinite being itself.
And this is so ironic. Trent Horn is so often saying that Christians should never claim that a God exists based upon the God of the gaps argument. So Christians should never conclude there is a God based upon a gap in scientific knowledge. Remember, Trent, you've said it multiple times in this video. Yet here you are, pulling a blatant God of the gaps out of nowhere. You literally say that there are questions that science cannot answer, so there must be a God. I can hardly believe that after you've specifically said multiple times that Christians should not use the God of the gaps argument, you now don't see that you are using the God of the gaps argument yourself.
Who or what created God? Who or what created the thing that created God? Who or what created the thing that created the other thing that created God? And we can ask these questions endlessly.
That means you could never have an ultimate explanation for anything. You could always ask, but what caused that? But what caused that?
Yes, Trent. No ultimate explanation. Maybe there is no such thing as an ultimate explanation, whatever that may be. Perhaps there are things we will just never know. But you can't handle that. For you, there simply must be an ultimate explanation for everything, and that ultimate explanation must be your God. That is how you are programmed, and how you program your audience. Don't think. Don't ask questions. If we don't know the answer, God is the answer. So in the end of your video, you even manage to pull yet another God of the gaps. So, what we've seen today is Trent Horn, yet another of these professional Christian apologists, who announces that he's going to refute an atheist. He claims that this atheist really is the low-hanging fruit, of course, suggesting that Trent Horn himself is much more sophisticated and that he easily will show how to make a good case for the existence of his God. And as we all can see, Trent Horn's rebuttal is a total train wreck. He stacks unsubstantiated claims upon more unsubstantiated claims. He uses the God of the gaps argument multiple times, despite claiming that he shouldn't. He doesn't understand how to make comparisons. He doesn't understand what evidence is. He seems to think he can define things into existence. He uses arguments that have been refuted 1,000,000 times without showing any awareness of that, all of which I've demonstrated in great detail. It really doesn't matter if I have discussions with supposedly professional Christian apologists or just Christian trolls in my comment section. They all do the exact same things that I just summed up. All of them use bad arguments, make the same reasoning mistakes, and use the same silly tricks to mislead their audience. As long as Christian apologists can make money with this, they will continue to do so. They don't care that they talk nonsense. All that matters to them is that they've got a substantial flock of gullible followers who watch their videos, visit their overpriced seminars, and buy their useless books. And if stuff doesn't go their way, they usually quickly switch to unhinged mode and threat the crap out of you with eternal punishment for not obeying their God. I'm not like that. Of course, I would appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, but if you don't, I won't throw you into the lakes of fire to burn for eternity. Really, I'm much nicer than that. You can subscribe or not subscribe, whatever you want, and there will be no violent consequences of any kind. I'm just a nobody. If I can be kind to you and sustain a normal and respectful relationship with you that is not enforced by the threat of violence, then why is the Christian God not capable of doing that? Oh, Christianity is such an illogical bunch of nonsense. Okay, thanks for watching.